Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Stand Down, and I am extremely happy to be here with a great friend of mine, Jay Mays. Welcome, Jay.
What's up? How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing great. This is a podcast about stand-up comedy and the many hilarious, wonderful people that have to walk away from the pursuit of stand-up comedy for any number of wonderful and painful and everything in between reasons. I know you from doing stand-up back in Miami, Florida, probably at this point 10 years ago or more.
More?
More, right? And you started coming to my show,
Mhm.
Casa de Haha. I made you one of my house comics. You were there every month. And then you had the Have Nots comedy where you were producing a lot of great shows down there, and we were happy to work
Yep.
together, all kinds of stuff. This seems like another chapter in our lives almost by now, but you have it much further in the rearview window than most of my guests so far. As someone who has kind of been through it already, I know you were listening to some of the earlier episodes and you were like, a little heavy here. Let me lighten things up a bit. So go ahead and
That's right.
lighten.
Yeah. No, it's been about a decade. What did I stop? Maybe 5-6 years ago now. Probably sounds about right. And I think for me, it wasn't so much a choice to quit, but there was other priorities that took the time away, I guess. So it wasn't so much, oh, I'm going to quit stand-up comedy and I'm going to quit it and do nothing. It was really getting married. It was the birth of my daughter. It was all these things that made that lifestyle no longer doable, I guess. And then you have these forks in the road and you say, okay, if I decide to go to this open mic that doesn't start till 11 p.m. and I have a few drinks and I have a great set and I'm flying after a great set and I don't get home till 1 and then I need another couple hours to come down, how am I going to wake up at 5 or 6 with my daughter who needs me, who wants to be with me, and then perform for my job, right? And so it wasn't so much that I decided to quit comedy, but I had to prioritize other things. And I think that made it a lot easier, is just making the choices to fill up my life. It wasn't easy for a lot of years. There was obviously really an empty spot there that I think a lot of comedians can identify with. And a lot of comedians are probably going through right now, right? Not being able to get on stage.
Yes.
But it was more choosing more positive, choosing more light than really walking away from comedy, I guess is how I like to look at it.
Right. So you really did just see a number of options and you're like, I can put my time here, I can put my time here, but something's going to suffer, something's going to wither a little bit. And, had you ever considered just, I'll be a worse father, is that an option? Was that ever or I'll be a worse worker at my job? That's an option that many comedians take, practical.
Yeah, no. And on that, let me tell you, when I started comedy back, I think it was 2005, like something crazy, I was single. I only had my dog to take care of, and I did have a job with flexibility.
Right.
But I remember other comedians in the community saying things like, I'm never going to work. I'm never going to get a day job because that's selling out. And I was like, wait, don't you have responsibilities? Don't you have bills to pay? And then I'm not going to name names, but there was other comedians that actually did have families that made the choice to not prioritize their wife and not prioritize their kids for this pursuit of comedy. And even though I wasn't in that situation, that never really rubbed me right. That never really sat well with me. Like I think that you can keep your obligations, keep your responsibilities, be true to the art, and still be a comedian all at the same time. I don't think it needed to be that drastic. Like, I have to be a shitty worker. I have to be a shitty husband. I have to be a shitty wife. I have to be a shitty dad or mom. I really don't think that's, I think there's room for all of it, but you do see it a lot, that all or nothing mentality in the comedy scene, or at least I did coming up in Denver.
Sure. So you think it is possible, but is it just like such a rare balance to be able to achieve balancing all of those things? And you decided that just for the benefit of everything else, that you would remove stand-up from the equation so that you could give that time to family and work and everything else?
I want to break up what you said into two things. So for me personally, I didn't quit comedy because I didn't have time. So your first question was, do I think you could do both? Yes. Do I think that's super hard? Yes. Do I understand? Yes. But if you look at the average comedian that might be getting a paid gig here or there, they have plenty of time. He or she has plenty of time to have the throughput of other things. I don't know any comedian that really has the discipline to sit down and write for 8 hours a day. And there's just no room for anything else because I'm writing. That maybe occasionally, but I still believe that there is bandwidth in the daytime, because let's face it, you don't get on stage till the sun goes down. So that leaves a ton of time. For me personally though, the reason why I quit was after I committed to my wife and after my daughter was born, I didn't find my jokes funny anymore. Right. So I came up more traditionally a blue comedian, a shock comic with a very inauthentic persona, where I knew the joke that was going to make people laugh. It wasn't how I felt as a person. It wasn't what I believed. My jokes certainly weren't things that I was doing in my real life, but I knew it would get a cheap laugh, like a shock jock. Hey, this will get a laugh. So I'd write these jokes that were dirty and blue, and I'd get up and I'd get my laughs, right? Because mostly I'm at dive bars anyway, and stories don't pay off in dive bars, right? Stories pay off when you're that next echelon. So I'm bringing these dirty jokes, and then I'm like, okay, but I am in a committed relationship now. I do want to be a good husband, and I'm a dad of a daughter. You know, these jokes really aren't that funny to me anymore. And I think that was it. So it was like, okay, Jay, for 7 years or so, you got on stage, you got cheap laughs with an inauthentic persona with blue jokes, and now your life is evolving. So I had two choices. I could write about, find my voice, which I never really did. I could find my voice and write new material that fit my life now, or I could just say, hey, let's just put that on hold because that doesn't feel good anymore. And I put it on hold, and I did miss it. But as you know, things evolved from there into what stand-up comedy would be for me in the future. But it was more the content than even the time or even the hangovers or even the lack of sleep. It was, I just physically didn't find my jokes funny anymore.
Right. That dissonance. I mean, that's a big thing in comedy, where after a certain amount of years in it, you start to outgrow your jokes, whether you realize it or not. And whether it's all your jokes or just a few, you felt it, and you have a very clear picture of it now. Did you back then, when you were going through it, was it as clear when you were kind of figuring all this out? Was the decision as easy to make as it seems now? Or was it more of a labor, like, I got to double down, or, whatever it was? Or did you always be able to have that calculated decision-making about it?
No, I was confused. I was lost. I was frustrated. I never really got tremendous traction as a comedian. I remember the first time I left Denver, Chris Charpentier, he came up, he started right after I did. So we were close, and he was roasting me on my way out. And I don't know why, I'll never forget this. It was so just perfect. We were at Club 404, and he was giving me a roast on my way out of Denver to move to Miami. And he walks up and he says, Jay Mays, how long you been doing comedy, man? And I was like, 7 years. And he goes, 7 years, 7 solid minutes. Just like, but that was it, right? Right. I had my go-to blue jokes. I knew I wasn't getting, long enough sets, more than 10, 15 minutes, 7 years, 7 solid minutes. But the reason why that hurts, like all roasts do, is because he was really right? I never really got that traction. And what the jokes I was writing, they just weren't real. They weren't real for me. They weren't authentic. They weren't my voice. And I think that's why I started getting ultimately frustrated. Absolutely.
And the audience can tell, I think, that when there is that disconnection, whether they realize it or not, they know something's off, or something just could be better, Of
course. Anthony Jeselnik, in my opinion, is one of the only comedians that has broken up to that upper echelon, telling totally inauthentic jokes. Now, I'm not saying Jeselnik does or doesn't believe that. I don't know him personally, but he's one of the only ones that is able to make a career out of shock, shocking jokes because he's a great writer, because he knows what he's doing, but none of that is probably really authentic to him, but he's able to do it. I would say that was more of the vibe, where like, how do I be shocking? How do I say dirty things that are funny? Because I could engineer it, right? I was smart enough to engineer a joke, but none of it really had anything to do with me. He, on the other hand, embraced that persona. He went with it, so he's been able to do that. But if you really think about successful comedians, I think they're more authentic, they're storytellers, and they're talking about things that they truly believe that happen in their life is how they get their voice and their traction. Jeselnik is one of the only ones that's been able to not do that and still gain a massive following. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I can imagine that he's not actually someone who delights in the murder of babies. Like, that's not a hard
correct
idea to hold. I mean, his jokes are abhorrent, but you can tell it's about the joke craft, and he's created this like sly, evil genius, arrogant character, and it's all balanced so perfectly. Whereas if any one of those things is off, immediately I'm going to hate the person, or they're going to be that douchey shock jock bro comedian that you kind of fear you were at your worst and no one likes to see. And yeah, on that note, like, you said you put your head down, or, you did comedy for 7 years and kind of didn't get any traction. Do you think that's something that a lot of comedians can relate with, especially I think after the 5-year mark, where you start to kind of like, you've developed some kind of persona, whether it's your true voice or not, and you've got a vehicle, but it's the plateau kind of place. And am I going to go anywhere? You're starting to learn the harsh realities of show business and what you might have to do to get to the next level. If you're that lucky, you can think that far ahead. For those people, should they stop? Should they go? I mean, some of them they just have to get to the end of that plateau and then they can break through? Or statistically, those are the people, the longer you don't get any traction, or you need to either stop or change or do something different.
Two things that you just reminded me of. First one is Seth Godin has an awesome, easy book you could probably read in 1 or 2 sittings called The Dip. And The Dip says, if you can't be the best, go find something else to do. I don't believe that that's necessarily the case for a lot of comedians. I don't want to say, hey, if you're not going to be the best, you got to quit. Right. But The Dip, if you're a comedian that's struggling right now, or doing anything that you're struggling at right now, The Dip will give you a lot of clarity. And that's by Seth Godin. The second thing I would ask most comedians, and again, I'm going back not into a professional circuit, I'm going back into more of the amateur circuit here. But if you really could get personal with each of these comedians and say, what's your why? Why are you really getting on stage? And when you start breaking down that why, not just one why, but why. So if you get like 3 whys deep with each of these comedians, and again, this is a terrible generalization, but they're either after some weird fame for some reason, they're enjoy a voice where they don't feel like they have a voice in a one-on-one in the real world, they get a voice with the microphone. Or number 3, and this was for me, you're getting on stage to fill some type of emptiness with validation and laughter. What was it, Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons? There's a hole in my heart that can only be filled by laughter from strangers. And I think for me, stand-up comedy was this novel thing where I was like, could I get on stage and make people laugh? And then once I figured out, well, here's a formula, I can do it, right? Your first 2 minutes, you're like, oh my God, people laughed. I was on stage. Like, that'll give you just a year or 2 in and of itself, right? Of just like, oh my God, I'm on stage. But then when I really started analyzing why am I on stage, it was some type of validation in my 20s. And again, we don't need to go too deep on what that was, but I wanted to be validated, and that was happening on stage. I've been a salesman for 25 years now, and I don't sell this way anymore. I'm more of a consultant and a coach now. But early in my sales career, every closed one, every contract that I closed was a little bit of validation. So I would ask all these comedians that don't have an authentic voice or have hit a plateau, like, what is their why? What is it really? And here's what I want to say. If they really took the time for self-introspection, they would find ways to fill that hole or whatever they're trying to do with stand-up comedy with something else that they might actually get traction with. That being said, there's going to be a lot of comedians out there that are going to struggle for 10, 20 years, and then they're going to hit it. and they will be big. So I don't want to discourage anyone and say, stop doing comedy. But you and I both know there's a lot of comedians in the amateur circuit that do not deserve stage time to hop on with the microphone. And if you really looked at what their why was, they could probably fill up that, whatever that emptiness somewhere else.
That is advice many comedians could do to hear, for sure. So even though comedy's in the rear view for you, you've still kept elements of comedy. You've kept a relationship with comedy years later. For those who don't know, Jay is my partner in a venture called Pitch Lab, where we go and we talk to everywhere from businesses to scientists to students, and we just kind of help them incorporate a couple comedy techniques into feeling better about pitching, presenting, speaking in public. And it's been a fun, really rewarding kind of tangent of stand-up comedy for me. You're definitely the architect behind it. So was that a natural jump to incorporating comedy into your business world life, or was that just an eventual inkling that you had to address and scratch an itch down the line?
Yeah, awesome question. So for me, I did a hard stop with comedy where when I decided to stop, I didn't keep, like, you hear about Rodney Dangerfield. When he quit, he'd still be thinking of jokes and throw them in and fill up a duffel bag full of jokes. Or, when I stopped comedy, I stopped. I wasn't listening to new albums. I wasn't writing jokes. I wasn't doing anything. The closest thing I was doing is I'd still get on Twitter and laugh at a couple comedians' jokes on Twitter and maybe try to send out a joke or two here or there. But when I did that hard stop, what I realized about comedy for me personally that was lacking is, and let's just take maybe Lewis Black, but definitely Chris Rock. When you see these comedians, and Bill Hicks even, they're getting on stage and they're comedians, but they're not talking about dick and poop jokes, right? Dick and poop jokes for a laugh. Hey, I'm a clown. I'm a jester. Everybody, I hope you laughed. I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. I started respecting more and more the comedians that were making people laugh and giving some type of message. And I thought to myself, if comedy ever comes back around for me, I want to be saying something of value, whether, and I don't want to say political, but whether it's something to help people change the way they think, change the way they feel, or just help people think. And so I knew that my days of being a comedian that was just getting up there and telling dirty jokes and, yay, let's go, and there's no value. I knew that if I ever got on stage again, there had to be some type of value. And then as more time went on, I said, what I miss about comedy, I miss that energy from being in a room face to face when things are vibing. I said, if I ever get back on stage in any form, I want to be saying something of value and be making people laugh. And when you just brought up Pitch Lab, I thought Pitch Lab was perfect because it was still scratching that itch where I could go and get stage time, but I was educating and entertaining at the same time. And the best part is Pitch Lab doesn't start at 11 p.m. in a dive bar, right?
Right.
Pitch Lab is in the day. So it fit for a lot of reasons, but it gave me purpose to get back in front of rooms without having to, have a bunch of drinks in the middle of the night and, get on stage at the dive bar where, what do we talk about, Daniel, where the bikers are shooting pool and they didn't realize there was going to be comedy there.
They're watching the finals. You are fighting up a stream made of molasses, just swimming. And it's great training for comedy, but after a while, you've learned the lesson that it has to teach. Okay,
so I want to ask you, because we're going to do a reverse. All right?
Oh, boy.
So you said as comedy is now coming in your rearview mirror, right? And as you're walking away from comedy and it nourishes you. So what are your thoughts specifically on the education you feel? So you have these skills as a comedian that you don't even realize are skills, right? Until you get in front of a room of people, not to teach them to be funny, right? We talk about that all the time. And, give me your view on that. But I don't believe that you could really teach funny, but you realize that you're actually a superhero to these people because of the stage time that you've clocked. What does that feel like when you're breaking down all these things you've learned, all these successes and failures, and you're giving these techniques to business people? Like, tell me how, you said it nourishes you, but
Yeah,
where is that coming from?
it is. I mean, I want to make sure that it's not just me being able to scratch my comedy itch in a way that removes the fear and pressure of comedy, or in some low pressure stakes where I get to be the funny guy and no one else does. Like, it's definitely not about that, where it could be with people in my shoes. But it does. It makes me realize, like, yes, you've come a really long way from being like a scared, funny kid in the back of the room. You can learn from any art form if you talk to someone who's done it for a while, and you can learn from their mistakes and their failures. And that's always been my favorite way to learn, is by secondhand, not doing it my damn self.
There's a train of thought called plus, equals, and minus in the world. And what I like about that is what they mean. And this happens with UFC fighters. This could happen with comedians. This could happen with any profession. But if you're here, you're in the center, you want to learn from people that are better than you. You want to collaborate and work with people at your skill set. And you also want to be able to teach people that know less than you. And there's always going to be somebody that knows less than you, but that's not only how
Sometimes.
you become a master.
Not always.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean, though. That's only how to become a master.
Sometimes there's literally no one who knows less than me, but yeah,
you're funny. Get you. But you get the point. Then you walk in, and these people
you're learning
have
three different ways at all times.
You got it.
Three
so
sources.
I think what Pitch Lab does for you is helps you see that, I did learn a lot, right? Sometimes you don't know how much you know until you're in front of somebody that's like, I know nothing, let me know. And I like to see that part of you. The other thing, and I want to tell this story real quick and you can color it in, but the time that I've respected you the most as a professional and as an entertainer was, we were downtown outside of AOR. We were going into AOR for a pretty high stakes pitch lab. You pull up. First thing you do is lock your keys in the car. Now, locking your keys in the car for me is like a panic-inducing thing. I'm going to get anxiety. I got to fix it immediately. And you took it in stride. Like, I'll work that out later. And you just let it go. Then on your way into AOR, if I'm telling the story and I'll let you color it in, you're walking through an intersection and a guy jacks you in the stomach for no reason. So you're assaulted. So you lock your keys in the car, you're then assaulted. You continue after the assault to walk into AOR. You're kind of like a little shaken up. Tell me the story. And it's like 15 minutes to showtime. And I'm like, I didn't know whether to be like, oh, Daniel, are you okay? Or like, rub some dirt in it, you're fine. I didn't even know how to react.
You were more flustered than I was when I told
Okay,
you.
let me finish it though. Here's the best part. I'm like, oh, geez, please let Daniel be in fighting shape, because this was an important engagement, right? In front of an important client. I'm like, please let him be all right. I introduce you. You walk up with swagger into this conference room filled with 20, 30 people. You took a sip of their free beer and said, thank you for allowing me to be here and get drunk at your place of work. And it was an explosion of laughter, and you never looked back. Like the ability, and that's what I consider a professional, is Conan O'Brien, all these late night guys that no matter what happened before that show, 5 nights a week, you got to turn it on. It doesn't matter if you're feeling depressed. It doesn't matter if you just got in a fight. It doesn't matter if you just got in a car accident. It's showtime. And that was one of the coolest ways that I've seen anyone take whatever just happened, and when it was showtime, you were there, you were on, and I told you that was one of your best ones. You were even coming after me a little bit.
I got scrappy.
You were even coming after me. You got it. Yeah. All right. So tell me the story. How did you get punched?
It was, yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, it was one of my best ones. And yeah, I locked my keys in the car. And my shirt was in the car, so
that's right.
I needed
have a shirt.
I needed my overshirt to look professional. I just had the t-shirt on, wanted the collar, and so I'm walking down the street looking for a stick that I can grab, because my window's cracked and I can shove the stick in and lift the shirt off of the back of my seat and fish it through. And so I'm just kind of casually walking just on the sidewalk, looking around, and this very rough and tumble young man, looked like he's been partying pretty damn hard, just walks by and then just shoots me just a tight little gut shot and just keeps walking like he did nothing, like he just kicked a pebble out of the way or something.
No message. There was no messages involved.
Nothing at all. Just like he just picked up a piece of like a Westward pamphlet or something. Just casual, punch this man, walk down the street. And I was like 50 reactions were like fighting to get through my head all at once. I like intense anger. What the fuck? What are you doing? Do I just run and sidekick this man in the back of the neck because the old Bruce Lee in me is bubbling up? And I'm just like, what the hell? He's like,
did you get hurt?
What?
Did you tense up?
I tensed up, luckily, which I had my old martial arts training. I don't know what it was, whatever. Or he didn't give me a big old wind up haymaker here. There wasn't
you would have
enough
seen
time
that. You would have seen that.
I would have seen that, and a small punch doesn't have enough time to build that momentum unless you're Bruce Lee and you got that 1-inch punch. But it didn't hurt. So it was more just like the shock of everything. And he was like, "What?" I'm like, you just do that to people?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's a weird way to make friends." And he's like, "Bring it." And he just walks around the corner. And I was just
that was it, huh?
What the? Yeah, I went, fished my shirt out, put it on, had a beer, told you the story. And yeah, we had a good set for those business company people.
It was awesome.
It was a lesson. It was definitely a lesson, because it's, who am I to teach people how to master their emotions or how to control their psyche for high stress events if I myself can't, handle some street scuffle. But yeah, what a weird time that was. We could talk Pitch Lab stories all day, and maybe we will sometime because it's real fun. But to get back, let's get a little. You're too well adjusted. Where are the regrets? Everyone else has a little smoldering regret. Is it something that, like, if you could give yourself advice as a starting comic, would it be different? Or if you could go back and say, hey, just skip this whole thing. Don't even get on stage. Don't bother. You can do something else instead. Any kind of regrets or ways you could have seen it shaking out differently in the multiverse?
It's good. Make no mistake, in those first 7 years, I really wanted it to work. Like I was just as like, I want to start opening for comics. I want to try, like, make no mistake. I was not like, well, I'm just doing this, but I know, like, I was in it in the beginning. I was in it. I just had no path. I would say my 2 regrets. One, I've already said. Instead of this inauthentic persona where I'm just telling dirty, shocking jokes to make people laugh, why didn't I mine my personal life more? Why didn't I? It's kind of back to that validation. I guess here, I'll just articulate it like this. Why didn't I take the time to find my voice? Probably because I was scared to fail. Do you see what I mean?
I know 100% what you mean. I feel the same thing.
By finding your voice, you have to fail a bunch and be like, well, that didn't get laughs, but that was me on stage. I never did that. I said, here's my coat of armor, which is fake jokes that I know I have engineered to make laughs. So I knew how to write a joke to get a laugh, and that's my protection. That's my protection. I'll never get on stage and bomb. I was more afraid of bombing, so I would bring fake stuff on stage than being authentic and exploring my voice. So I don't want to call myself a coward, but there you go. I wish I was stronger. I wish I was more
honest and vulnerable.
Yeah, to get up and do that. And number 2, and this is no joke at all, I wish I would have tried more comedy sober. And that doesn't mean I was like a raging lunatic, but I would have a few drinks. I never got on stage totally sober. Now I'm a dad, right? I barely drink anymore. I'm totally clean.
Just do it in the car before we go in.
No, before Pitch Lab, that's not even an option. So I guess what my point is, all those years on stage, I could have been working on my stage fright. And instead I'm like, hey, let's just have some drinks. And then it's funny, all this stand-up comedy cred I had, and I still had to start from zero when I started Pitch Lab, learning how to get through stage fright sober.
All over again.
all of it. None of it stuck because a 10 p.m. mic after 3 or 4 drinks, who cares? That's not beating stage fright.
Right.
It's not beating stage fright.
You were a drunk warrior in a suit of armor. Now you're like Jay Mays.
You got it. Take it or leave it. In a business, when we're inside organizations, right? Inside conference rooms that we cannot be drinking, right? Mm-hmm. We're there to teach. We're there to provide value.
Right.
You're not gonna be able to drink and get that stuff done. So those are my 2 things.
Those are so juicy. And you've got such a knack for like turning your points into advice for others now. It's such of like distilling your points for consumption. It's fantastic. It's a great skill you've honed through all this stuff.
Thank you.
So if someone asks you now, are you a comedian?
Yeah. It's funny.
Should be.
It's like It's like being asked, are you an artist? Like JD Lopez hit me on his, are you an artist?
Yeah.
Like, we're all comedians. We're all artists, right? It's like, what was the funny metaphor? Everybody's a photographer now with an iPhone, right? And everybody's a comedian with a Twitter account,
right?
We're all artists. We're all comedians. Do I consider myself a comedian? Yes. And I consider myself a comedian, yes, because I did put in the work. I did log the hours. I had 10 years worth of experience on stage, mm-hmm. and I was a comedy producer, like you said, with the Have-Nots. So I understand the business. I understand what it takes to be successful. However, in the circles of people that still remember me, it's kind of hack to call myself a comedian because I never really made it, right? I made $20 from Scuba Steve, for a quick set.
Sure.
I got paid here and there. So
it's almost inside comedy and outside comedy.
You got it. Right. But yes, I consider myself a comedian because it wasn't like, well, I did this experiment and I got on stage 3 times and I wrote a bunch of, like, I did this for years.
Right.
Now, I was never great. I never got traction. I'll be honest with you. I was never awesome. But yeah, I consider myself a former, what do they call it? Recovering. I'm a recovering
right.
stand-up comedian.
There's like an asterisk. If like, I did comedy, but if you want to go deeper, we'll talk about it.
But yes, there's a lot of people that know me intimately would say, yeah, Jay was a comedian.
So was a comedian, right? Not is a comedian. It's so fun how that gets so blurry. Right. So here's something I ask all my guests. When you were in the middle of doing comedy, in the peak of it, and some new person found out in your life, what would you say when they ask, tell me a joke?
Oh my God.
It's not even an ask, actually. They're like demanding it, but yeah.
Yeah. In the beginning of my career, I would always fall for it. And then I would say something super dirty and it was like totally inappropriate. And I was like, ooh.
Record scratch and everyone looks around.
That's it. But no, I know you're not supposed to do. Comedians hate that, and you're not supposed to do that. That's why I do that to you on Pitch Lab all the time when I introduce you and I say, "Tell me a joke," right? Just to mess with you. And 2, we don't need to go into it on your podcast here, but I love me some cheesy dad jokes now.
Mm-hmm.
I love.
Don't get it started. We're opening up a can of worms.
But yeah, no, I never really had anything clean, anything that's a go-to. And yes, that's very, very obnoxious. So
we hate it.
If you're listening and you're not a comedian, never ask a comedian to tell you a joke or make you laugh. Don't do it.
Amen. So comedy is going through a lot of changes right now. A lot of media is going through changes. Shows being delayed and experimenting with other types of filming and all kinds of stuff. And the biggest thing I'm seeing now is, comedy's trying to make the jump to Zoom and to online video recording and redoing shows in this totally new platform. And it's been funny and very painful as well to watch a lot of comedians struggle with reformulating their entire act for a completely different scenario, things you wouldn't have, the way you look at crowds, the way you pace things, the lack of audience reception and hearing the laughter. You've been working on kind of figuring out like the techniques and tips and stuff for that. So I would love for you to share some with everyone out there because we all need to hear it.
Yep. Well, first off, it's not easy and it's not a one-to-one, right? So being in a room and being on camera are 2 different things. And I've been working on how to get good on camera for 4 or 5 years now. Two people that have helped me tremendously. Number one is Mike Kilcoyne, and the other one is Julie Hansen. Her handle's Acting for Sales. But those two people helped me tremendously along the way. And I'll give you 4 quick tips. 3 tips on how to look and feel more engaging on the camera. And the 4th one is if you're actually running like a Zoom, if you're a salesperson or you're leading some type of group of people. So the first one is, and this is an obvious one, but you got to get your camera high enough where the camera's not looking up at you. So right now I got a Zappos box. It doesn't get more bootstrapped than that.
You got some elevators in your heels.
You got it. So you need this. So the camera's coming right at you. So do what you can so the camera's almost looking down at you, or at least right at you. Number 2, you need a good light source in front of you. And what I mean is right now I have a big window in front of me, and I have literally tried. Oh, you're lifting it?
I'm lifting my camera to take use of these tips immediately.
Okay. I have literally tried and looked at my camera in a ton of different places. Your face is going to look different. The shadows are going to make you look different. Get your main light source in front of you. Again, that sounds simple. It's not. If you have too strong of a light source coming from all different ways, you're going to look bad. So get your light source in front of you. Number 3, and this is the best one to be engaging, and this is the hardest one that I'm still trying to crack. Look at my eyes right now. If I'm looking at you, where do my eyes look like they're looking?
A little to the right for me.
Yep. But I'm looking at you on my screen. Now, you got it. Now, where am I looking right now?
At me in the camera.
But I'm not. I'm looking above our boxes. I'm looking right above them into blackness.
Right.
But I know to look above that while I'm talking to you. And I know to look at that while I'm listening to you, not because it's helping me, because it's actually hurting me.
Right. To not see my real-time reactions.
Correct. So it's to my detriment because I lose reading your body language. But at the same time, it's actually helping you feel like I'm connecting with you and I'm looking at you and I'm actually listening to you.
You just described the modern day spotlight. It's the spotlight. Exactly. It blinds you. It removes the amount of information you can take in visually, but it looks good when you're not doing this all the time. Like covering your hand over your eyes looks weird. You can always tell a new comedian when they cover the spotlight, unless they're like trying to just see someone in the crowd.
Yeah. So for me to sit here and look, I want to look at your eyes and I want to connect with you, but I can't. I gotta look this way. So
very
that's
important.
What is that? 2 or 3? That was 3. And then the 4th one is, for any business people, anybody that's leading, what you don't want to do, and I see this all the time, especially in the world of sales, is all the people you're presenting to are going to go on mute and just watch. They want a real passive experience. And you'll say stuff like, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? And everybody's on mute. Nobody's going to answer you. No. They won't even reach for it. Right. They won't even reach for it. So what you want to do is if you want to be more interactive during your Zoom or during your video conference, I would say something like, Daniel, how did I articulate that one?
Okay. He's talking to me? Oh, excuse me. I liked it very much. Mute.
You got it. Does everyone agree with Daniel, or does anyone have a view different than Daniel's?
Right. You have to create the space for interaction instead of just assuming it.
You got it. Beth, how am I doing? Am I hitting all the points that I should be hitting, Beth? Beth comes off of mute. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Everybody agree with Beth? So these are some of the things where you just have to be a little bit more deliberate, because in a room, when we're in a room together, I could say, does anybody have a question? And then just look you in the eyes and I'm picking you. Mm-hmm. Zoom and these video conferences, it's not like that. And there is such thing, I don't know if you read about this, Daniel, but there's such thing called Zoom fatigue. There's a new video conference fatigue because you're always being looked at. Not only are you processing your own face, but you're processing 6 faces and you feel like
and your own visual image. People are right. Like imagine not having a stand-up brain where you've had to get over your voice and your image and all of the physical things, right? Having to deal with that all at once. How interesting. That's hitting non-performers pretty hard, huh?
Exhausting. It is exhausting.
Wow.
It's taxing on the brain. And for me, even right now, I want to do as much as I can to build up my muscle without exhausting myself. I'm very conscious that I don't want to be on Zoom all day long. It really strings me out.
Right. Oh, that's another great tip. It's almost like how they, when you have a group of people, you need someone to call 911. You don't say, "Hey, call 911." You have to be like, "You, specific person, call 911." Or even just the old crowd work technique where among the crowd, you'll kind of make friends with one Beth in the crowd, and she'll be your kind of metronome all night. And you go back, "Oh, you like that one, Beth? Oh, Beth liked that one, everyone." So you've like added another character to the show. So I definitely can see how that is important in Zoom world, where literally everyone almost feels like that anonymous audience member, especially when you're not on camera and you are just part of the audience in one of these crowds, and it's like you're not mic'd. You're going to hear everyone in the world coughing, and instead of, it's insanity. But there's some salient tips. And again, it's not teaching people how to be funny. That is totally up to you. It's the little things, like if you went and they told you to take the microphone stand and move it to the other side of the stage. It's literally that kind of stuff, but redone for everyone living in a digital quarantine nightmare. So way to make the nightmare a little less rough.
Yeah.
So how about this? If your daughter, who is hilarious, by the way, gets a little older and says, "Hey, Dad, I think I want to be a stand-up comedian." What do you think?
I'll absolutely support her. I will.
Yeah.
With some caveats.
You got giving her a couple lessons on her first day out.
I'll be sitting in the crowd almost every time, right? Hovering, making sure I know where she is, where she's going at. But yes, I would absolutely support that, because I think the skills that you and I and most comedians have on stage, and I guess this is the whole reason for your podcast here, it's going to translate to something, whether it's success as a stand-up comedian, whether it's learning how to make people laugh, whether it's something that translates to something future in your career. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being able to get up in front of a room, communicate, speak authentically. And again, I do want to say what a gift and what an honor it is to be able to stand in front of a room, grab a mic, and make people laugh, right? Whether we're doing it at Pitch Lab, or whether you're a professional comedian that gets to have their own Netflix special, or you're a podcast where you get a few minutes of someone's time on Headbuds. What a gift to be able to do that and to share that, because some people go their whole lives not feeling listened to, and it's definitely a route. It's definitely a solid route.
Well, damn, I could not think of a more fitting, constructive end to the podcast today. What a way to bookend it. Tie a little bow on it, mwah, and send it, disinfect it, and then send it off to someone you love. I can't thank you enough for making the precious time to hang out, Jay.
My pleasure. Awesome to see you, my friend. And we'll catch up on the other side of this.
Yes, we sure will. Give my best to the fam. And thanks everybody for listening.